Hi, I'm Laura,
And I'm Jessica,
and welcome to Nomads.
a podcast about international teaching, travel, and life.
We met in our undergrad music program in Minnesota and are now both international teachers.
I just came from Kazakhstan and now I'm teaching for a school in Panama.
And I just came from Turkmenistan and I'm now teaching for a school in China.
However, though, because of what's happening in the world, we're both currently in Minnesota.
If you haven't yet, don't forget to check out our Instagram and follow us at Nomads Podcast.
And if you're listening on YouTube, we'd appreciate if you would subscribe and turn on notifications so you get alerted when we upload.
So last week we answered some questions about teaching music for you.
And this week we have a special guest, Jodi, who will be talking about her journey to becoming an administrator and answering some listener questions.
Welcome, Jodi. Could you give our listeners a brief background of your teaching history and what you're doing now?
All right. I am currently the Director of Instruction at Ashgabat International School in the country of Turkmenistan. My journey began 34 years ago, so it's been a while. It started in kindergarten and, actually preschool, and then kindergarten. Then I took a little break to have children, and when I came back, I started back in elementary school, and it wasn't designed on purpose, but as my children grew, I also was promoted to upper grades. So I have literally taught everything from preschool to high school, and it really literally went as my children grew. I've also been an elementary school counselor, and just about any teaching job I've been in, I've always been like the lead teacher, or I've been in charge of a student study process or something like that. And so I've always really had some great experiences as far as being able to develop what I think leaders need, which is a really broad spectrum of understanding students and teachers and parents and just the whole schooling aspect. So I've had a lot of experience with that. I've also worked in other industries other than schools, but with education in mind. And so I've also worked in the country of Belize, where I worked with all of the schools there in Belize, working for the Ministry or Department of Education in the country of Belize. And now this is my second international post in Turkmenistan.
Awesome. You got it all in one breath. Okay, well, let's go on into our questions. So most of these questions are from new teachers or prospective teachers that have some questions about admin, but we'd like to start out with what inspired you to pursue teaching abroad?
Ever since I was in high school, the summer between my junior and senior year and my summer between my senior year in high school and freshman year in college, I was able to go on some short-term mission teams. My first year was to the Philippines, where I was there for 3 months. And my second term was in Haiti, where I worked at an orphanage. And that is really, that experience not only put the little interest of international education for me, but it's really what sparked my whole wanting to go into education, was to work at this orphanage.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So how did you transition from being a teacher to being an administrator?
I think, like I had mentioned, it was pretty gradual, and I always kind of wore two kind of hats, like a teacher hat and like a teacher leader, or I was in charge of a department or some kind of leadership position. And so You know, it's interesting because what I feel like my strengths are is what I'm actually doing right now as like director of instruction.
Mm-hmm.
I help teachers, I work with teachers, I assist them, I kind of make sure kids' needs are being met, all those kinds of things that I love doing. I feel it, and I feel like those are my strengths.
Mm-hmm.
So like even if I think about being higher than that, like a principal or
Yeah.
a superintendent. I mean, I'm kind of technically a principal, so it'd be more like a superintendent.
Yeah.
I kind of look at their job and I go, yeah, I don't think that's my gifting.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm really good and great with what I do as I work with teachers, curriculum, instruction. That is really my strength.
Yeah, I think director of instruction is a really unique position. I don't think there's really anything like that in the States. That's just an admin that's focused on the teaching aspect.
Yes, and I love it.
Yeah.
It's like, to me, it's an invaluable position
Mm-hmm.
in a school, because a school should all be about, right, instruction and learning. And so to have someone that's focused and in charge and passionate about instruction and learning is like an amazing job.
I guess you kind of started talking about this a little bit, but were you an admin in the States too, or just
Um,
overseas?
in a school setting, I was not an admin at a school setting. Well, kind of. For a while, I left the education field for about 4 years, and I went and worked at a group home where I started a school. So I was in the United States. I was in the state of Virginia, and I was working with a population of kids who typically have a lot of educational needs, and if not, social emotional needs that impact their education. And these are kids that were being placed in homes. Uh, and so it was really difficult for them to, one, be placed in a home and then go into a new school. So I was hired to develop a whole school model where they would start with me in the school that I would develop and get them kind of caught up, get them stabilized, and get them prepared to go back into the public school.
Mm.
So I was a director there, which really I was like teacher, principal, superintendent, working with the school district and the state of Virginia to
Yeah.
get this school where it needed to be and accredited and all of that. So my experience in the US was unique as an educational leader, not in a public school setting, but more, and it wasn't more like a private school, I would say, than a public school setting. I don't know if I answered the question.
Yeah, not officially, but basically you had kind of assumed roles that were similar.
Right.
Correct. Similar. And developing a school model in school, but that was in the States, and it was under very unique situations.
Yeah.
Right?
Kind of on a broader scale then, I guess, like what are the differences in lifestyle, I guess, or like schools compared to in the States versus where you've been overseas?
Okay, so in the States, I have taught in the states of Minnesota, Colorado, Illinois, and Virginia.
Wow.
So I've taught in several states, and the difference, is that what
Yeah.
you, or
Yeah, the biggest
similarities?
difference, well, or both, biggest differences and similarities between schools in the US and abroad.
Okay, so in the unique setting that we're in, with international schools, probably the biggest difference is not even cultural or ethnic, it is socioeconomic. So in international schools, and I think most international schools are this way, because they're either nonprofit or for-profit schools, people have to pay a lot of money for their education. So you have a high socioeconomic group of people that you work with, which is unique than working with the students in the United States. In the United States, you have much more of a variation in socioeconomic backgrounds. Even if you're in a very wealthy school district, you're still going to have quite a spread in your economic status of your children. So to me, that's the biggest difference, where that in and of itself, a high socioeconomic group of students and parents has its own unique little issues as well. But for the most part, we always talk about, we take in Turkmenistan, probably 85 to 90% of our students, English is their second language. Well, in Denver, Colorado, I taught in a school where 95% of the students, English was also their second language. So, you know, when you look at language issues, barriers, and things, that seems to be similar to some of the experiences I've had in the United States compared to international schools. I worked in inner city school too, where culture was very different than where I would have typically been in, and impacted by multiple cultures. And that's the same in like international schools. You have multiple cultures that come together. So the curriculum is the same. We use everything that you would use: Prentice Hall, Pearson, Journeys, Houghton Mifflin, all of them are the same textbooks and curriculum that we use in the United States. So there's a lot of similarities. I think it's a pretty easy transition to go from like schools in the US to international schools as far as students go.
Yeah. Have you noticed any differences? Like, I don't know, what kind of person do you think would be the best candidate for moving abroad? Like, is it more suited for families or couples or singles? Like, I'm sure you could make it work either way, but if people are kind of waiting for that right time.
Right. I agree with you. I think it just depends. Like this country in Turkmenistan is really suitable for families. Of course, when there's no virus, but
Yeah.
they're because you can have a nanny, you can it's set up for parenting very well.
Yeah.
And it's clean and it's safe and it's just amazing, right, for families. The hard part about international is on your family, though. They never really are rooted into, quote, a home. And there's a whole, I don't know, psychological, what are they called? Third world kids, right? Where they really don't ever feel rooted in something. So there's that kind of impact, but there's some kids that love that. So
Yeah.
it just really depends. I think though for singles, it's pretty easy. It's easier, I think, to move, and like in our organization, teachers can move every 2 years. It gives you an opportunity to work in many different places if you want to. So I think for singles, it's great. I think for like my husband and I, our kids are grown, so we don't have to, you know, haul kids around with us. As long as we get to go home, you know, during the summer.
Yeah.
And Christmas or whatever, to go see grandkids and visit with families, I think it's a pretty great set up for us as well, towards the end of your career, where you can be mobile and not have all those tons of responsibilities that you usually have with kids.
Right.
Okay, this is kind of, I guess, a multifaceted, bigger question, but what could someone do to like market themselves or like prepare themselves for teaching internationally? Like it could be things to add to their resume, like do during interviews or like study in college. Any recommendations?
In college, I think it would be great to have an experience outside of the United States. I think that would be a good thing anywhere during high school, college, where you do get to experience another culture, whether that is, like in my experience, one summer we built buildings. The next summer we worked at an orphanage. Even if it's a 2-week exchange where you go and help kids in a classroom or do something like that, I think it's really great to have that kind of experience. Or the person who's doing it, in addition to, like me, if I'm hiring and I know that someone's already had a little bit of experience in other cultures and know what it's like to sleep on a plane for 12 hours
Yeah.
and get in and be able to just go and do lots of things. I think what is unique about teaching in international schools is that you are expected to do more than what you do in a public school, as far as after school activities, going to events in the evening, going to events on the weekend. It's not like in the US where, oh, you want me to coach? Well, then you better pay me more for that. That's the US
Right.
mindset.
Yeah.
Whereas like international school, it's more like, oh no, we love our kids. We're just going to provide this basketball after school for a couple hours every day.
Yeah.
Right.
So I think, so then if someone's preparing for an international job, I think it's great if you can see that they do lots of things, like, I coach or I do singing lessons, or, I have multiple things. I'm just not a teacher. I do lots and lots of other things. I think that is a plus when you're looking for someone to join your international school.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree. I was able to do most of those things. I don't know if it helped me out at all, but
Well, I think, for me, if I were looking for someone, they've got to have a lot of energy. They have to seem like they're involved in school beyond the first bell and the second bell,
yeah.
or the last bell, you know what I mean? I think too, if they've had experiences with different cultures, if they've not been able to get out of the United States, but they've worked in different areas, like even within a large city, I've done inner city, I've done, I did some work with people who didn't speak any English, and those kinds of things too kind of lend itself to me thinking, okay, they're willing to figure out and do what it takes to work with people that think differently than you, speak differently than you, and those kinds of things.
Yeah, that was definitely a big part for me, is just realizing that like a lot of these kids come from such different lifestyles or home lives or cultural expectations, and I'm still using the same strategies to try and teach them, and a lot of times that doesn't work. So I have some new teachers that either graduated this past spring or possibly in the next couple of years, and they're really nervous about all of these standards and benchmarks and having to prove that they've done X, Y, and Z. So how much do you actually have to show that to the admin, either stateside or abroad, that the students are actually following the curriculum?
Well, I'd say stateside and abroad, there's there's always a bit of accountability for being able to demonstrate what are your students doing and where are your students at. How that gets done is very differently, though. I think there's much more emphasis on that in the United States, teaching in all the states I've been in, than in, let's say, like in Quality Schools International, which is where we teach. We emphasize mastery learning, and we emphasize a smaller amount of material to be covered in a year. And I, as an administrator, don't go around asking all the teachers, prove to me they mastered it. I'm expecting my teachers, however, to say when a child has mastered something, that there's some evidence or things that they can show me that demonstrates that the child actually mastered it.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, I can remember in my own teaching experience, when I first started teaching, probably my first 10 years, there was no such things as standards. And I remember when the standard movement began.
Oh no.
And as teachers, we all sat there going, this will never, ever stay.
Yeah.
Because you know how sometimes in education, if you just wait 3 years, it goes away, you know? So I can honestly say I'm still a little stunned that it's still around, but, you know, I think whether we call it standards, benchmarks, whether we call it the student's will in our system, which is the TSW, whatever objective, whatever we name it, what I think good educators do is that they're able to say, this is what I'm teaching, and this is how I know my students will be successful, and how I know they will have gotten what I wanted them to get when I was teaching. And that, to me, is the essence of the standards movement. Here's what I want the kids to know. How do I know they got there? That's the evidence and the proof. As a teacher, I just think that's great instruction. So I guess that's one of the reasons why I think that it hasn't gone away, because there always needs to be that element in education where, how do I really know my kids got what I needed them to get? And being able to show a parent or demonstrate to the student themselves or to demonstrate to administration, this is what I learned. And I think that's the essence of those movements.
Okay, so more like working with teachers, like what types of things can they ask you or should be comfortable asking you, and like maybe there's some things that they should work out on their own, I don't know. So like things like that, what should they come to you with, or what can they ask you about?
Well, I don't know, Laura could maybe answer this one too. I feel like I have a pretty open door policy, and I want feedback. I want my teachers telling me what they need, how I could assist them, what's not going well, what's not going right. That all tells me what kind of adjustments and things I might need to make, what professional development maybe I need to give more of to teachers, or, you know, I kind of listen and to what teachers are saying, and they're like, and then I can go, okay, I've done that too much, right? So let's back off on that. So, you know, I would always say, one, new teachers should always have a mentor or a person that they can ask those questions to, whether it is a teacher in the building or a friend or a teacher outside the building, but someone that they can always, that's like their first go-to person, right? I'm having trouble with this. Have you ever had trouble with that? What are you doing? You know, what did you do to solve it? That kind of thing. I think they should always have one or two little boards that they can bounce all those things off of. If you've tried those and exhausted those, I always say now to my teachers, just Google it. Because right now, like when we launched into this whole realm of distance learning and online learning, that was new for everybody, right? And so I got to the point where it was like, hey, right now the whole world is asking the same questions you are. Just Google it, and you're gonna find an amazing amount of answers there. Click the little video, and you're gonna be able to watch someone doing it.
Right.
But you know, the bottom line is, if that is something they really need assistance with, I hope my teachers come to me. New, middle of the road, and old teachers, doesn't matter. In fact, right now, I would say most of my veteran teachers are the ones that need the most assistance, because they're the ones that are most terrified about all the online platforms and information coming at them quickly. So, yeah, so I would hope all my teachers come to me with what they need.
Yeah, I think it's kind of in the beginning, you kind of have to feel out your admin, like how they are. Because in the States, I think it's more you can ask them for money, or you can ask them to walk in your classroom just to kind of check in with like classroom management or see if they catch a kid doing the same thing. But they are not always going to be there for you to help you write a lesson plan or do something more specific to your content. And I think internationally, especially the director of instruction position, is really set up for you to be focused on the teaching part. So, what is the role of admin like amongst each other? How would you say that? What are the expectations for like the principal, the DI, the superintendent, counselor, like all of those? How do they work together, or what are they supposed to be doing in that regard?
I think we work as a team.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of like, you know, a head coach, an assistant coach.
Yeah.
I'll use a lot of sports analogies. But they, you know, all working together. Of course, we all have our own areas that we are focused on and concentrating on, hopefully, and and working together then to just, in my realm of it, I'm making sure the teachers are getting what they need. The counselor kind of oversees things, but kind of makes sure the kids are getting what they need. And then my director, or like superintendent, he's kind of more in charge of making sure parents and other stakeholders are making sure they get what they need. But then together, we all come together and work as a team. I really feel like where I work, which is not always true when I've been in the United States, I feel like our does work more like a team. Like one of us isn't more important than the other. What I say is not under what someone else says. It's like we all kind of are equal, and that's kind of how I felt. I don't know, it'd be interesting, Laura, how you felt about that. I mean, ultimately I knew that Pat made the last and final decisions, but Pat gave me a lot of latitude and a lot of respect, and just I felt like we were teammates. Right?
Yeah.
That's kind of how I felt. It'd be interesting to see how it was viewed by a teacher.
I think you have to have the person who is officially at the top be okay with that and have that attitude, because if they just want it all for themselves, then it's not going to turn out that way. But I did think it was good to see that multiple people were thinking about the problems that we had instead of just one person, because it's always better to have more people to help make the decisions.
Yeah.
So I think it was pretty equal, and I think you each had different skills, that it was a good balance for the team.
Yeah, it really was.
Okay, so since we're both music teachers and teachers in the arts, like something that comes up a lot, like especially in the States, is about like budgets and like things being cut out. I guess like what is I don't know how to phrase this, Lori, you feel free to help out, but like is that as big of a deal overseas, or like who makes those decisions like overseas stateside about like budget cuts and things like that?
Well, stateside, those budget cuts would be made by your school board.
Mhm.
And you know, it's really what your school board's philosophy and ideals are about what an education is for the kids in that region that control that the school board controls. In our system, we are 36 schools in 30 different countries, something like that. And QSI makes those decisions, our headquarters, and I believe that they have a very strong belief that music, art, and those music, art, PE, on foreign language, that they're all part of the education, and one is not more important than the other.
Mhm.
As far as that goes, and that they are super supportive and have maintained keeping those teachers at all costs. In fact, I just hired another half-time music teacher in a time period where nobody's hiring anything.
Right.
So yeah, so I think, you know, it really depends on your system, their core beliefs, how much money they have.
Mhm.
I
Right.
can tell you, I personally struggled with this when we first started distance learning, because we were all really trying to grasp what should we be doing. So we did start with just the core subjects, and then we added the specials as we went. And it really killed me in a way, fundamentally, ideologically, to
Mhm.
do that, because I just, myself, I feel both my children that are now in their 30s are like music and art and all of those things were just a huge part, and band was a huge part of my life. And I just, so I so strongly believe that it is of the utmost importance to a
Yeah.
well-rounded education, right?
Yeah.
um but we had to make those kinds of choices when we were rolling out the curriculum. uh, we found that we overwhelmed our parents by giving them everything at one time. So that's why we started kind of rolling back a little bit and then adding, and specials unfortunately wasn't the last thing we added.
Yeah.
But
Mhm.
yeah, but it did not go away. We still did music, we still did art, we still did PE, we still did everything distance learning.
Yeah. I think you can tell, especially when you're doing an interview too, like if the admin are going to value your position, whatever it is. Because if you just start
Mhm.
asking those questions about like, how do you support it? Like, what events do you have? Or if you start asking about the budget, you can tell because every job I've been to is like, we have an account for music, or we are ready to pour this much money into making the program better. And that's why I decided to take those jobs.
Yeah,
Right.
and Pat was our school was the perfect school for you for that,
Yeah,
because he was
it was
willing
great.
to pour everything in that. And when you really think at the international school level, all of our events, the majority of our events focus around the arts.
Hmm. Those
Yeah.
are
Right.
mandated by the company for the most part, right?
Yep. So it's what gathers the community. It's what everyone works a long time to do. It's just really, in my opinion, quite amazing.
Hmm. Jessica, I don't understand this question that you wanted me to ask.
Well, I can ask
Okay.
it. I was just I guess like kind of along with it, like if I was a teacher at your school and I knew like there were maybe going to be cuts and it might affect like the music department, like what should I be doing, or how do I like get the help or advocate for my program? Like any advice on going about a situation like that?
Yeah, advocating for your program is really great. Um, I think the thing that I would caution though is doing it as positive as you can. I have been in situations where programs in the 80s, 90s
Mhm.
were cut, and we had angry parents and angry this and angry that, and that doesn't get anybody anywhere. Um, like with schools. So advocating in a positive way, doing as much as you can, like, oh, can I do a fundraiser? You know, we'll wash cars and do a fundraiser for something where you're actually demonstrating that you're going to try to help and assist. That'd be like advocating
Mhm.
for that. I think being as positive as you can. One of the things in an international school is that your community is very tight and small.
Yeah.
And so if you go around, oh, I can't believe they're gonna, with all these negative, I can't believe they're gonna cut my program, or I think they might cut my program, or just any of that is really detrimental to the program and to the teacher. So just being, like I always say, right now, we are being handed lemons. And if you're being handed lemons in any situation in your life, what can you do to make it lemonade,
Mhm.
right? What can you do to make it so that it's sweet and great and refreshing for everyone?
Yeah. When I was asking for more instruments this year, I knew that I was going to
Mhm.
have to research everything, find out exactly how much it was going to cost, maybe go to a
Yep,
couple of different stores. I went to the stores, tried all
you
the
did.
instruments,
Mhm.
verified that they could actually be purchased. And that I think made a big difference because I'd already done all of the work and he just had to
Yep.
say yes.
Yes. And that's what I mean by advocating for your program, because you did do that and you came up with other options than just buying them.
Right.
You looked at renting them and all kinds of things to say, hey, we're not just stuck in this one mode. Let's look at, and that, I will say uh, to any of the young teachers coming out, Laura was a young teacher on our staff, but she always came to me with solutions and ideas. That was amazing. And that like goes a long way. Even if she thinks it's a big problem, she doesn't come to me and go, hey, there's a big problem here. She comes to me with a terrific idea or several ideas, or have you ever thought of this? Or, even though she probably didn't, in my last school.
Yeah, I may have said that a couple times.
But I'll tell you, it was a very high level of maturity that she always would approach me with these options. And if there was a problem, she came to me with 3 different kinds of solutions. Whether I used those or not might have been a different story, but I'm sure it helped in the solutions that actually came to fruition.
Mhm. I think I
Yeah.
mainly did that so it didn't sound like I was just complaining. But I'm
Right.
glad it came
And
out
that's
as the
what's
right
good.
way. Yeah.
It did. Because, like, especially this last year and your first year there,
Mhm.
so stressful because we had never done a program like
Yeah.
that before. We had no idea what to expect and how to go about it. So, I mean, you were a terrific guinea pig because you you didn't turn negative on us. You just really kept coming at us with, and you never gave up. You kept trying. That's another uh, great characteristic. She never quit. She just kept trying and trying, even though there were some very, very, very frustrating, tearful days, if I could say.
You could.
But she never gave up. And I'll tell you what, I do believe Pat cried at your first concert with the band. Just so you know, because he was just overwhelmed with what those kids had learned in, you know, basically 2 quintiles.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't know that.
Amazing. Oh yeah, he was crying.
Aw.
He's a little tender that way, you know.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I think that's a lot of our main questions that we were asking, worried about, and a lot of people, especially with everything going on right now, I think they need to feel secure and like they want all of these answers before just jumping into it, but you don't always have all of that.
Right. Yeah, thank you. And once again, for our listeners, if you have questions or suggestions, please let us know either in the YouTube comments or our Instagram page at Nomads Podcast.
And thanks for listening from wherever in the world you are.
We'll catch you next time.
Bye.
Bye.